Welcome to another international podcast on Metallwoche. There's a PRISM story in the US, then there's Syria, Turkey, the upcoming G20 meeting, ongoing discussions about an EU-US free trade zone, and last but not least, new regulations to bring forward a European Union banking union, the targeting of offshore accounts, the next step of the Fed, and possible bail-in strategies from governments worldwide. A hell of topics to discuss, and who is better to discuss that than Gerald Celente from Kingston, New York. Gerald is the director of the TrendsResearchInstitute and publisher of the TrendsJournal. Many consider him as one of the top trend forecasters in the world. Welcome back to our show, Gerald.
Oh, Michael, always great being on with you. Thanks for having me.
Gerald, while we both talk to each other, your Presidente de Estados Unidos, Barack Obama, is visiting Germany for 24 hours and currently is making a speech in front of the Brandenburger Tor to the public, by the way, using two teleprompters. Recent survey of one big German newspaper, Die Zeit, shows that, believe it or not, 2 out of 3 Germans would vote for the President of the United States if they could. They think he is more successful than Angela Merkel. The Time magazine, on the other hand, had a cover in 2010 with Angela Merkel, and they wrote, quote, "Miss Europe has more room and more power than any leader on the continent. What will she do with it?" And now I have to give this question over to you, Gerald. You live in the USA, you watch the developments there, but also in Europe very closely. What would you like to share with our listeners today?
Well, there are a number of things going on in the States, and as I keep looking at them, they become clearer and clearer to me. As you know now, we have our own Stasi, so Angela Merkel may feel very comfortable with Barack Obama with her today, in the sense that we have the National Security Agency listening to virtually everything, watching everything, and following everything that everyone does at any time and anywhere. So, and of course, this has been making news in the States, but as you well know, in getting the TrendsJournal, this is no news to our readers. We wrote in the TrendsJournal, actually, with a cover that alienated a lot of people. We had it read, "All aboard, last train to Auschwitz, kiss those calories goodbye." And we had Americans,
Yes.
heavy Americans, boarding boxcars with Made in USA on them. And we did a whole story in there, Michael, about Big Bro. And of course, that's Big Brother. And how Obama and the administration is out Orwelling Orwell. But this doesn't seem to bother the German people, of course, because 2/3 of them would vote for Obama. We've lost our rights in so many different ways. Matter of fact, the Supreme Court, I mean, that's really a misnomer for that joke of a bunch of people. They just abrogated our Fifth Amendment rights that give you the right to remain silent. Could you imagine this? This is the foundation of America's Constitution. It was repealed yesterday without hardly any news at all.
Right.
And now, if you remain silent, that is a sign of guilt.
I agree completely, Gerald, but it's the same, I guess it's the same in Germany here, and therefore 2 out of 3 people would vote for him instead of Merkel. This, what you just mentioned, I think we have to stick with this a little bit closer. There were some subscribers of us who felt a little bit suspicious when they heard the news about the whistleblower Snowden, because they said it is funny that it is coming up now with a story through the mainstream press. Is this something where we make a conspiracy theory on top of a conspiracy fact? Or how do you see this?
No, I don't think it's conspiracy theory at all, because the woman that really broke the story has done a number of documentaries criticizing the United States and actually had to leave the country, because every place she went, anytime she boarded a plane, she was always pulled aside and she was harassed quite often. And she was the woman that really broke it. So I don't think it's a conspiracy theory at all. And again, this is not new news. to people that have been following it. It's only news now because it did finally break in The Guardian and The Washington Post. But again, there's a much bigger element to this, as I look at it. This is not about, so yes, they are spying on us, but who are the they? And they are private contractors, government contractors, and it's the revolving door. This is more about money than about spying on people. According to the Financial Times, the United States is spending $80 billion a year hiring 850,000 private contractors to do this work. The head of Booz Allen Hamilton, Mike McConnell, he was the former head of the National Security Agency under Bill Slick Willie Clinton from 1992 to 1996.
That is the guy who said I never had sexual relationships with this woman, right?
That's the guy. And I smoked, but I didn't inhale him too. So what I'm saying is that this is more about money. And it's also very evident when you see how the money and the crackdown on civil liberties go so closely together. It's the merger of state and corporate powers. It's called fascism. Government is business and business is government. And the business of America, by the way, now has become war. It used to be the business of America was business, from the famous quote of one of our former presidents, Calvin Coolidge. And now the business of China is business. So you can see the changes taking place. America is a failing empire. It's lost its direction. It's been taken over by a military-industrial complex and a monetary mafia. That's the end of the story. Those are the two branches that are controlling the government.
Gerald, you told us that, and you were just on this topic already, you told us that our political leaders, when they lose control and are threatened to lose, will take us to war. Jim Sinclair said a couple of days ago that the West should be very careful not to play chicken with Putin. What is your mind watching the new developments towards Syria?
Putin is not going to back down. And when you read, for example, different releases coming out and seeing different things, you had the French foreign minister, for example, I believe his name was Dumas, a former one, that he was in the UK before the violence broke out in Syria. And people in the UK, high officials, said that they were arming outside rebels to cause destabilization. This is not going to work. If Syria continues to devolve into an escalating civil war where the United Arab Emirates and NATO continue to arm the so-called rebels, or no more than Al-Qaeda and al-Nusra affiliates, it's going to spread into Lebanon. It'll spread into Turkey. It'll spread into Israel. We are looking at the same kind of a formation in a different form that began World War I. This is the beginning of World War I if the Syrian war expands. Russia is not going to back down. And the United States and NATO can intimidate Iraq and Iran. They can intimidate smaller countries like Libya and Syria. But they cannot intimidate a country that has thermonuclear weaponry that, if they're launched, it could be the end of our lives as we know them. So I don't see this, them really doing anything to slow Russia down or intimidate them. Putin is not going to stand for it. And also, their only port in the Mediterranean, of course, is Tartus in Syria. And they're not going to give that up.
What is on your mind when you watch this situation around Europe for the time being? When you see the new decisions by the German parliament, they are involving more and more toward a banking union across Europe. you see that we have tough talks now to open a European and US free trade zone. What is this? What comes up to your mind when you hear this?
Again, it's a takeover. As we wrote in the last TrendsJournal, it's the obituary for democracy. The money mafia has taken over. And we go, it's official. The West democracy is dead. Elected governments are a front. Politicians a little more than wise guys for the money mafia. We had a story in there, Eurozone crisis has increased IMF power. And this is from the New York Times. And we write about how Miss Lagarde's presence reflects her close, long-time relationship with one of your fellows over there, Mr. Schwabler. But it also was a confirmation of the enormous stature that Miss Lagarde and the IMF have acquired in Europe as a result of the euro crisis. IMF has more say over crisis management than many Eurozone members. And it goes on, Miss Lagarde helps impose order on quarreling national leaders. So it's very clear, this is a takeover. It's a consolidation. Again, there are two mafias, the money mafia and the military industrial complex. They're taking over. It's a consolidation of power. It's in front of everybody's eyes. It is not a conspiracy theory. They're writing about it in broad daylight and for everyone to see, hear, and understand. But they'd rather talk about Justin Bieber, Madonna, and the Kardashians.
Yeah, absolutely right, Gerald. I listened to the trend in the news a couple of days ago. There was one question I want to bring up here. When we watched the ongoing action against the demonstrators in Turkey, you mentioned in your show that Erdogan offering a referendum would never happen in the US. Therefore, you thought it's quite a good progress. Did you change your mind recently?
No, I don't know all the details of what's going on over there. I do know that they're turning it into an Islamist country, as opposed to what a lot of people want, because, of course, the father of the Turkish government was totally opposed to that, and it was what Turkey built itself on, and also the rampant commercialization of Turkey under their Erdogan government has alienated a lot of people. And of course, it's when people get into power, absolute power, you know what it does. But it's a step that, look what happens in so few countries where a leader of the country will say, let the people vote on an issue.
Yes.
I mean, to me, that's a breakthrough at some level. And by the way, just as the police are beating the people in Turkey, they beat them the same way everywhere. Remember in the UK when the cops beat the hell out of that guy? The guy that was in a wheelchair?
Yes,
and then he died of a heart attack? Look at the way that what goes on in the United States. I remember I think it was the G8 or G20 meeting in Pittsburgh. Look what happened up in Toronto at the G20 meeting. Look what's going on now in Brazil. And the cops are beating the hell out of everybody. But what's bigger than this, Michael, are the hundreds of thousands of people that are taking to the streets in Turkey, that are taking to the streets in Brazil, in Spain, in Greece, around the world.
Gerald, let's have a look at the economic front for a moment. It looks like that all the action people really concentrate on is whether or not the Fed is going to exit and possible bail-in strategies from the governments worldwide. For the Fed and an exit strategy, I guess you will offer me to press your bullshit button, but with the economic figures coming out of China, the US, Japan, the Eurozone, what's your professional view for the developments in the coming months?
They have to keep it going at some level. But of course, as I've always mentioned, when all else fails, they take you to war, and they got your mind off the economy really quickly. I believe that the Fed is going to have to, at some point, raise interest rates, and they're going up already. You know that I bought historic buildings up here in Colonial Kingston. I got a loan last year at this time for a commercial loan, 3.5%. That same loan today is now at 4%. The only reason we're having a recovery, as you well know, you don't have to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's low interest rates, record low interest rates, and all of this stimulus, printing cheap money. They have to stop it at some point. Now they call it tapering, of course. That's more white shoe boy language.
Yeah.
But here's my belief in what's going to happen. They're going to have to slow it up. But they cannot afford to slow it up, and they'll do something to keep it at the pace it is now to get through to the Christmas holidays. Christmas is a big time of the year for particularly a country in which 70% of its GDP is based on consumer spending. Following that, I think they're going to try to tighten up. And it's not going to work. It's going to really crash the world economies because, as you mentioned, look what's going on in China. Go around. What's going on in the hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets in Brazil is because of the slowdown. Then they're going to, again, release more money into the system. And that is when you're going to see the true economic calamity unfold, because it will fail in proportions far beyond what anyone could imagine. The hyperinflation that everyone is waiting for will then kick in. So I'm looking more around 2014 going toward 2015 for the real calamity to kick in, after they keep trying to keep playing the game as they've been so successful at doing for the last 5 years, to keep the economy afloat that should have crashed back in 2008.
There's a probe question, Gerald, at this point. Generally, people tend to concentrate on the price of gold instead of the value of gold. I know that we both have a different opinion here, but I personally think that the price of gold is quite irrelevant at the moment. The main focus, and I have the feeling, reading a lot of things on the English blogs, on the American blogs, there's something where people think there could be a looming effect coming up on the US dollar. Is that something what you watch there as well?
Oh, sure.
Is there something on your mind?
Yes, but again, what's keeping the dollar in any level of sustainability is what all the nations around, all the countries around the world are doing to prop up their economies. And that, of course, I mean, look what's going on now with all the hot money that was flowing into all of these other countries that is now flowing out. So they're having their own problems. And so the dollar is looking strong because so many other currencies are looking weaker. But the fundamentals of the dollar is still weak. So the dollar maintains its strength not because of its strength, of its intrinsic strength, but because of the weakness of all the other currencies as well. And as I said, I believe the bond bubble, of course, is going to pop as interest rates go up. So that's what I'm saying, Michael. The game is going to end at some point, but the manipulations are taking place that keeps the Ponzi scheme going for yet another day. And I believe that day of reckoning is going to come not in 2013, but in 2014. But of course, there are the wild cards. And the wild card to me is war. Because if the Middle East breaks out into a major war, you're going to see oil prices skyrocket, gold go through the roof. Gold will break through 2,000 in a blink of the eye, and all of the world currencies will decline in value.
Now, I agree on this, Gerald, completely, and I think that the biggest mistake they can do for the time being is that it's not the value and it's not the price of gold what they should be afraid of. I think if they keep this policy going, a lot of this hot money is going into crude oil, and this is inflationary. It's not the price of gold. That is a thermometer. That is nothing else. But what you just said, if you look forward a couple of months, the situation, especially with the gold price, I think as long as the gold price is staying in this lower 1400 levels, it's getting more dangerous, because if there is any event even through a short squeeze, and we both know you need the speculators, but they will come back on this, then they could have probably the gold price at much higher levels than they originally thought.
You know, I agree with you, by the way. It's not the price, it's the value. I think that's the way you said it. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you know that the premium on buying the hard assets of gold is at all-time highs. And it just keeps going up higher and higher. And what's going on in the paper markets are all these naked shorts that I believe the central banks are using to drive down the price of gold. You know, so and when we look at all the rigging on the LIBOR markets and all the rigging going on in so many different areas, of course gold is being rigged. I think it's not a conspiracy theory. Everything is being rigged. Whether it's the high-frequency trading in the stock markets, it's a rigged game, or the insider trading. So I'm a long-term believer in gold. I've not sold an ounce of gold. And the only reason I'm not buying more now is because I've been buying real estate. But, you know, some people are asking me, should they buy gold now? I don't give investment advice. But, you know, here's my belief. They keep telling us that the miners say that it's cost $1,200 to take an ounce of gold out of the earth. So if $1,200 is the base price, well, you're pretty close to it now. So use your own judgment on whether or not you're going to buy. I believe that gold is going to go well over $2,000 an ounce in between now and sometime in 2015. And that's not too far from now. We're talking a year and a half away. That's not a long time. And also, again, there are so many mitigating factors, particularly war. And I cannot emphasize that enough. Because when war breaks out, you know, I've never been a believer, by the way, of buying. I'm not a believer. My main focus of buying gold, and you've been following me a lot of years, has never been for the sole hyperinflation purpose. It was for a devaluation of the currency purpose. Yes. Because they're all devaluing their currencies. But now, when war breaks out, then you're going to see the hyperinflation hit. And that'll drive gold to new heights. And again, I'm in gold for the rest of my life. I'm not a trader of gold. I'm a holder of gold. And here we are. I'm talking to, you know, Michael in Germany. I mean, you know, how many people there know the stories of what a gold coin would buy when war broke out? I mean, it bought your freedom. So gold is not... You know that guy, Nouriel Roubini? They're always giving this guy press. Of course, it's what the prostitutes do. You know, he's a Harvard boy. You know, he's a member of the club. You know, Harvard, Princeton, Yale. Bullets, bombs, and banks. So when they speak, the rest of the prostitutes listen. He said in 2009 that gold would be lucky to break over $1,100. And he said it would never go over $1,500, let alone $2,000. And he calls it a barbaric relic. Hey, you got it wrong, Mr. Roubini. It almost hit 2,000. And now he says it's going to go back to under 1,000. Why would anybody listen to someone that's got it wrong consistently?
You're definitely right, but it just had on my mind that hearing Ben Bernanke, when was it, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, he was asked about gold. No, it's not money, it's just a tradition. Yes.
Yes, you should tell that to the Chinese who are buying oil from Iran and giving Iran gold.
Yes, it is something people should have on their mind, why they are doing this. And I heard... Especially, you know, that in India, the government is taking every step they can take to avoid that people are buying more gold, but the people are finding always a way to avoid this, and even if it's through the black market, or more businesses now going to the United Emirates business. Gerald, when we close here, it was something I forgot last time already, and I promised to do it again. The TrendsJournal is published not only in the English version. It is available in Germany too, right?
That's correct.
And if people want to take the Trend Journal, they can go through your website or they can go through the Berlin website, which we will place a link to it as well, because I think a lot of people don't know that there's a German version already available.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, there's a German version. And the Trends Journal, of course, as you well know, we also do Trends in the News every day. And that's where you get the real news, not the prostitute news. And you get the news of the world, not the news of what's going on in the news you get in the United States isn't really news either.
I know, I only can recommend it. This was Gerald Celente, Director of the TrendsResearchInstitute, publisher of the Trend Journal. Gerald, thank you very much for joining us on Metallwoche.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Michael. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.